for them to run a country, and they run this country, they run England, they run Germany, France, and all the big capitalist countries, yes. And in some places they do it through puppet administrations, smaller countries, colonial, semi-colonial countries. But if we take this country or Germany at that time, it's cheaper for them, less headache, if the people can have elections. As long as things are kind of stable, that's what an equilibrium is, it's not too much one way or the other. They can grant a few concessions, and they can allow elections. And so if people were getting very upset at the Bush administration, pull Obama out of the hat,
put him in there,
and allow him to be, and it allowed a lot of energy to be, and hopes to be placed on him, and it postponed any uprising and kept the equilibrium. It's not even to say whether Obama's for this or for that or against this or against. It's really irrelevant. It allowed people to participate. That's the cheapest thing for them to do. When they cannot do that anymore, and we'll talk more about when that occurs, but in certain periods, when there's such an economic crisis, which they refer to in number 1, then that equilibrium, then an election is not enough. Then election is not enough, and even the military or police might not be enough, or killing a few people in the neighborhood may not be enough. And that's when they're looking for something which they define here as fascism. But it's interesting because to do this, if the military can't do it, you need something bigger. That's what we're talking about. If the military and cops, now we all know cops can kill a few people, but if they send the cops in, they can only do so much. And even if they send the troops in, sometimes the troops can't do. So we're talking about something bigger, a bigger crisis. One second. And that's what the fascists, this organized mass movement, we'll talk about its nature, but it's there to smash and maintain this equilibrium by destroying any working class and poor people and oppressed people's demands. But at the same time, what it has to do, and that's what he talks about, the negation, the opposite. At the one hand, it does that. On the other hand, it pushes the big capitalists out. Not out of power, but out of running things. Because if you unleash a mass movement, then it has its own demands and its own dynamics. And that's what Hitler did. And that's why it's a little bit dangerous for them. Capitalists don't, why not just use it all the time? Because then it pushes them out. And it might smack them down a little bit too. So, but you had a question, then Debbie.
I wanted to ask, and maybe you can maybe get to that, the nature of it and how it looks. Because there's a website that Bush had when he was in office that was the 14 points on fascism, the old world century. And when you go onto the website, it gave you 14 different ways that they bring in fascism. It's like a campaign. And they talked about how one of the things they do, they beef up patriotism. They have a lot of events where people are waving flags, and everybody puts flags on their car, and everybody is talking about, I'm patriotic, I'm American, buy America. And then they talked about
get rid of the immigrants.
Yeah,
but that's what Hitler was doing to the pure race.
And then one of the other another point that he talked about was how they more police repression. Police are giving more power over the people to and then they usher in big programs like the Patriot Act and Homeland Security, where they say they're protecting you against the terrorists. So they have a lot of campaigns where they start hate campaigns, hate the Muslims, they the terrorists. And all of this is a big diversion, and I was just wondering if you was going to talk about that in terms of the nature of what, because you can pull that up, y'all, 14 Points of Fascism by George W. Bush, the Old World Century. And it gives you each point and what falls up under each point in terms of the campaign that they usher in to bring in fascism. It's a lot. It take a lot of money to do it. I mean, it's very expensive, this campaign, and you'll see where you fit into that whole scenario of buying into it, because it outlines and it gives you each tenet of what it really is, how they really use an actual campaign to foster in fascism.
And we will deal with some of that.
On
Yes.
the people.
Yeah.
You know what, Sandra? It's ironic that you just talked about that, because we just left a meeting which was basically a campaign setting, talking about the city charter and Dave being the mayor and everything. Then when the guy was done, the campaign manager got up and he was like, how many patrons do we have in here? So we were able, he said, we got flags. We want to start waving our flags.
That's deep.
He passed our flags.
Yeah.
We want to start waving our flags.
that's the
We want
Tea
to take
Party.
back our country.
That's the Tea Party.
Well, who they keep taking it back from?
I said, Kevin, you want to play? Kevin said, hell no.
Okay, we will deal with some of this, and I think it'll come out. Yes.
Party is a mess.
Things seem to be more of a struggle religious today. You know, Muslims, the Christians. It seems like that's where this world is going, in a religious domination.
Except history, and one thing Marx showed, that behind any religious controversy, whether you go to the period of the old biblical times, to the Crusades, to the different Catholic religious fighting, there were actually classes. There were classes behind them. Protestant wasn't just a religion that somebody thought of. It was an attempt to fight the Catholic Church, which was in bed with the feudal nobility, and the Protestant sects were the capitalist class, the business and the merchant people who were looking for a little more freedom to do their thing. So I think if you look more closely today also, that it really behind religion will stand interests of governments and classes, meaning the working class or the ruling class. What I'd like to do, though, if we can, is to continue so we can get to some of these things, because so far we've seen the economic crisis and then this overturning their own political system because they're unable to maintain it. Somebody else? Derek, you want to read? Number 3 on page 18 there.
Given the conditions of modern industrial society and the immense numerical disproportion between wage workers and big capitalists, it is practically impossible to carry out such a violent centralization of power by purely technical means. It is equally impossible by such means alone to liquidate most, if not all, of the gains of the modern workers' movement, including those germs, quote, germs of proletarian democracy within the framework of bourgeois democracy, unquote, as Trotsky correctly characterized the mass organizations of the workers' movement. Neither a military dictatorship nor a pure police state, not to speak of an absolute monarchy, has sufficient capabilities to atomize and demoralize for very long a conscious social class with millions of members, and thereby to prevent the reappearance of even the elementary class struggles that are periodically produced by the simple play of market laws. To accomplish these ends, the big bourgeoisie needs a movement that can set masses in motion on its side, that can wear down and demoralize the more conscious parts of the proletariat by systematic mass terror and street warfare, and that, after the seizure of power, can totally destroy the proletarian mass organizations and thereby leave the conscious elements not only atomized, but also demoralized and resigned.